pagan decapitation discovered at dawn. Yahuwah's systematic disassembly of paganism in 1 Samuel 5 reveals the dawn day start as seen in Genesis 1. And here's a picture I took off of one of Walter's presentations. It's something to consider. No matter what yesterday was like, birds always start a new day in the morning, even before dawn, not at midnight or in the evening. So why are some people still confused? That's a question I've had for a long time. Why are people confused? Do they not read the scriptures? Here is Yahuwah's end time message from 1 Samuel 5. This is a study from Yah's covenant calendar. The date of this study is around 1141 BC, or about 350 years after Moshe. What does a Dagon study have to do with Joseph, or Joseph as in the English? What would Joseph have to do in this study? You're going to find out later on in the study. Have you ever seen an ad like this? Friday night only, all you can eat. Fish fry, only $5.99. Pretty intriguing advertisement, isn't it? Is there any connection to this, to Dagon, the fish fry? Is there any connection back then? And what about today? Is this study all about a righteous fish fry? Or was this story preserved to expose an important revelation for our future? Our future, which is becoming very, very soon. Dawn. A lifeless image does not have the capability to actually pay homage to Yahuwah. Hence, the visual implications then, and prophetically for today, of Dagon falling face down before the ark are nothing short of absolutely astounding and profound. Who is able to stand and defy our majesty, Yahusha Ha Mashiach? Who? Not one, not that I know of. Getting started here on our study, I'd like to speak about the word day. We choose in our studies not to use the word day because it's very inaccurate, and we actually choose to use the word cycle in its place. Cycle is a much more accurate word. If you go down to this bottom paragraph, we're going to look at it. The 24-hour cycle will be defined below to pinpoint the two seasons. Number one, cycle. That's 24 hours containing the two seasons, one of light, that is or light season, and one of night, the Leil, night season. Number two, season, eth, that is 12-hour blocks of time, whether it is light season or night season. A very important application example of season is found in Yirmiyahu 33:20-25. And there you read about the covenant of the night season and the covenant of the light season. Very important topic. The year was 1141 BC. The Philistines waged war with Israel, and a defeat was realized. Most importantly, the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant. Here's the end of chapter 4 for context. 1 Samuel 4:15. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were so dim that he was unable to see. And the man said to Eli, I am he who came from the battle, and I fled today from the battle line. And he said, what was the matter, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. And your two sons have died, Hophni and Phinehas, and the ark of Elohim has been captured. And it came to be when he made mention of the ark of Elohim that Eli fell off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the old man was heavy, and he ruled Israel 40 years. The ark of the covenant was no longer in the hands of Israel. 1 Samuel 4:19. And his daughter-in-law, Pinhas' wife, was pregnant, about to bear. And when she heard the news that the ark of Elohim was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and gave birth, because her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman who stood by her said to her, "Do not fear, for you have borne a son." But she did not answer, nor did she set her heart to it. And she called the child Ichabod, saying, "The esteem has departed from Yisrael, because the ark of Elohim was taken, and because of her father-in-law and her husband." And she said, "The esteem has departed from Yisrael, for the ark of Elohim was taken." Yahuwah's Ark of the Covenant was placed in the pagan temple, 1 Samuel 5:1. And the Philistines took the Ark of Elohim and brought it from Eben Haezer to Ashdod. And the Philistines took the Ark of Elohim and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. So who is Dagon? And better question, what world system of worship avows allegiance to Dagon today? Yes, I'm asking, is Dagon alive and well today around us? I thought Dagon was from history. How come I'm asking, what world system of worship avows allegiance to Dagon today? And what about the very popular Christian fish symbol? What about that? Dagon is a pagan god of the Philistines and Phoenicia. It is recorded they believe Dagon was the father of Elyon, or Baal. Elyon? We know that Hasatan likes to duplicate and copycat, but he's not very good at it. How close is Elyon to Elohim or Elyon? Fairly close, isn't it? Is this another false duplication from the adversary? Continuing on. Note, the Hebrew word for fish is dag. There is more on the name ichthys near the end. We're going to be looking at that quite closely. When you see this fish symbol, what does it mean? Ichthys, the Christian fish symbol. How often when you're driving around town, just getting groceries, whatever, do you see this symbol on windows, back windows, or on bumper stickers of cars? What does it mean? Do you look at it and go, "Oh, there's another worker for Yahusha"? Or is it? Who is it giving allegiance to? Is it giving allegiance to Yahusha or a pagan god? First mention of Dagon, and it's read as our mighty one, and that's found in Judges 16. There we read about how Samson was brought to entertain the Philistines at a festival for their mighty one. Have a look at these pictures. Do you see similarities between the two? How about this open mouth on the hat? And how about this open mouth on the hat? Have a look at this bent cross. That is as occult based as it gets. Is there similarities? The Dagon connection to Saul, to Christianity. Yes, you read that correctly. 1 Chronicles 10:10. King Saul and his sons perished in a battle with the Philistines. Saul was beheaded the following day, and his head being removed, they fastened it in the temple of Dagon along with Saul's armor. And they placed his armor in the house of the Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shan. Ashtaroth was a war goddess of Assyria and Babylonia. Ashtaroth, or Ashtoreth, and that's Easter, or in the Scandinavians, how they said it is Eostra. It all goes back, it comes to us as Easter. She was the goddess of the Phoenicians. She was and is the goddess of sex and fertility in the pagan belief system. Prostitution was a rite in the temple of this no god. It was a definite rite, and when you read what was required of young maidens, you would be shocked to believe that this actually happened back then. What about today? Have you ever considered Hollywood? It's no different. Is there a devious sexual connection that we can see today with the modern Christian fellowship of Dagon and Ashtoreth? Can we see that visually today? What about this picture? This depicts the male and female anatomy for procreation. I do not believe I need to explain it. It's quite clear. Please also note the 8-spoke wheel insignia of Shamash. That is a direct reference to Ha-Satan. Very direct, that 8-spoke wheel. Sephirim, connecting the dots. Have you seen this identity before? Look closely. Is there anything in common here with this fish hat? Anything in common at all? Consider the mother harlot. Can it safely be said that Dagon is the face of modern day Christianity? Why would these men be wearing these hats? What purpose would it signify? What does this fish symbol mean today? It's a Christian fish symbol, all right. So therefore, we have to ask, what is the foundation of Christianity? Do these two identities share the same threshold? Yes, that word threshold is going to come into play very, very deeply later on. Yes, these two identities share the same threshold of paganism. One is cloaked in Christian garments and a mitre hat. The other is covered in fish scales. Here is Semiramis. This is Dagon. And look what we have today. Who is Semiramis? Is she not the one that had the bastard child Tammuz that was born on December 25? Was she not the one that got pregnant in a prostitution party or a sexual party at Easter time? And I say Easter on purpose because that's what it was. 9 months later comes Tammuz, December 25. Isn't that what this is all about? Look at these hats again, one more time. That hat and that hat. Where is the similarity? Notice the waving hand. Notice the waving hand. Why do they picture the waving hands the same? Why? There is nothing new under the sun. Fish god context, and this is a quote that was on the internet. Nineveh worshipped a fish god too. Dagon figures into the story of Jonah as well, although the deity is not mentioned by him in Jonah's book. The Assyrians in Nineveh, to whom Jonah was sent as a missionary, worshipped Dagon and his female counterpart, the fish goddess Nanshe. Jonah, of course, did not go straight to Nineveh, but had to be brought there via miraculous means. The transportation Yahuwah provided for Jonah, a great fish, note that, a great fish, would have been full of meaning for the Ninevites, extremely full of meaning, for they worshipped a fish god. When Jonah arrived in their city, he made quite a splash, so to speak. He was a man who had been inside a fish for 3 days and directly deposited by a fish on the shores of Assyria. The Ninevites, who worshipped a fish god, were duly impressed. They gave Jonah their attention and repented of their sin. Do you think it was coincidence that Yahuwah put Jonah in a fish? He knew who they worshipped. He knew what would get their attention because they worshipped Dagon, the fish god. Knowing who Dagon is, what happened to the idol when the Ark of the Covenant was placed near it in the pagan temple? 1 Samuel 5:1. And the Philistines took the ark of Elohim and brought it from Eben Haezer to Ashdod. And the Philistines took the ark of Elohim and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And the Ashdodites rose early in the morning and saw Dagon fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of Yahuwah. So they took Dagon and put it in its place again. Moving forward here for some thoughts I want you to think about as we go through this study, this next little bit. Does it appear that there is one free light season between this verse and 1 Samuel 5:4? Note we left off at the third verse. Is there a light season between number 3 and number 4? Is there a light season there that Dagon had one free, relaxing light season before the next devastating event? I ask this specifically for a purpose, because sunset theory is going to show that Dagon had some time off from humiliation. So I want you to look at this as we go through it. A little bit of review here. And the Ashdodites rose early in the morning and saw Dagon falling on his face. Is not face to the ground the premier position for obeisance? Please note the word morning is seen in this verse, yet the Hebrew word boker, or morning, is not there. Is morning correct, or is it false? From where do the translators receive their idea to place morning here when the actual word is not written in the original Hebrew script of this very verse? Where did that word morning come from? Who has the authority and power to place Dagon in that fallen position? And what could this possibly symbolize? Could this event be connected to the same pattern of idol destruction seen in the plagues of Mitzrayim, where their supposed power and authority was vaporized by Yahuwah himself? Is that the same pattern here? So what primary word reckons time in this verse? If you'll note here, the word morrow. It's 4283 machar. What does it mean? You look over here, here's the Hebrew letters, machar. And here is a definition, the morrow, tomorrow. KJV uses morrow or the next day. Is this correct? What are we going to be seeing? Here's the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. This is the morrow, tomorrow, the next day, the day after, until the next day, the morrow of that day, the day after the Sabbath. So it appears quite well that it is the day following a stated day, or a cycle, I should say, to be a little bit more clear. Mokaroth 4283 is from Machar 4279, and most certainly identifies a specific point when the cycle of the week exchanges or advances to the ensuing cycle. It becomes our endeavor to determine exactly when that new cycle begins. We need to reference Proverbs 25, verse 2. Very interesting. Are we able to agree that machar, or morrow, designates a 24-hour period that follows the immediate cycle upon mention? Let's look at the next word. What secondary word reckons time in this verse? H7925 shacham. And what does it mean? It may sound silly, but a point must be made. What identity were they rising early on? Early? If you look over here in the definition, it says they were rising early. So what identity were they rising early on? Did sunset govern the cycles of the week, or was it a dawn start cycle of 24 hours? If they were rising early, when would that be? The sunset event triggers the beginning of the 24-hour day, and I use that word specifically, the 24-hour day, according to sunset reckoning. So if it's the beginning of a 24-hour day at sunset, how come their day begins at night? Why doesn't it say a 24-hour night? This is part of the problem with the word day and problem with sunset theory. What type of time reckoning applies to the Ark of the Covenant? That has to do directly with Yahuwah. Is he going to use sunset theory? Yahuwah chooses Shakam, time frame to speak. Jeremiah 7:13. And now, because ye have done all these works, saith Yahuwah, and I spake unto you, rising up early, that's the word Shakam, and speaking, but ye heard not, and I called you, but ye answered not. And if you want to see something interesting, look up Shakam. You will find that Abraham used that, the rising early. He used that to speak with Yahuwah. Yahuwah used that with Moshe when he was speaking with the Pharaoh. He was commanded to rise up early, Shacham, early on the start of the day when he spoke to Pharaoh. That was a direct command from Yahuwah. Yahuwah chooses Shacham as his time to speak orders or commands. So let's look at Shacham. What does it mean? From Strong's, to start early in the when? In the morning. It does not say early in the evening. Brown Driver Briggs, to rise early, make an early start. Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary, it is being at the beginning, early at the beginning. What about the Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew language, which was done early in the morning, immediately before the starting of the day's journey? When I lived in Nicaragua, the horse carts used to come by early in the morning, getting ready for their day of selling materials. Early in the morning is when hard people or hard workers begin their days. Reflecting on the Hebrew word definitions, can we safely say that the Philistines placed Yahuwah's Ark of the Covenant in the house of Dagon and arose at the beginning of the next new 24-hour cycle, only to see Dagon face down on the ground? That's what we have realized before. The question is, when they arose early, when was it? The problem is, thus far, we still have not been given definitive Hebrew terms on the start of the new 24-hour cycle. So when does the new cycle begin? And that brings us to the next verse. Yahuwah does not fail to inform us of his design from creation. He has told us, he has given us everything that we need for our salvation. Are we going to doubt it and go into a different book to learn different ways? Or will we stick with his word? Shall we consider the Tanakh witness? That's what we're advised to see and do in Isaiah 8:20. So let's examine 1 Samuel 5:4a, the first part of the verse. And when they arose early, there is Shacham, on the morrow, Machar, early on the next day, we can say. What about this word morning? When they arose early on the next day at dawn, because morning is dawn, they were up early at the very beginning of the next cycle. Why does this word here not say Areb? It says when they arose early on the next day at morning, dawn. Is this going to agree with sunset theory? You can see down here that word is boker. This word boker becomes extremely important. Who inspired these two words, 79:25 and 42:83, to be repeated from the last verse? Why is there a repetition? Is this repetition a form of confirmation, a second witness again? And what about that word, boker? What does it mean? Let's have a look at some definitions. This word boker becomes ultra important. And here's a question to ponder. I want you to think about this one as we go through it. What on earth does an ox have to do with the start of Yahuwah's 24-hour cycle? An ox? Sounds pretty strange, doesn't it? The answer will come soon. So here's Brown Driver Briggs and their definitions of boker: break of day, end of the night, of beginning of day, morrow, next day, next morning. When is it? Strong's exhaustive concordance. Boker, let's look at this. Properly, dawn. That's a big one, isn't it? How come it does not say erev, as in evening? You know, it says dawn, and it's from 1239. Let's not miss this one over here, though, as the break of day and morning. So if we go to the root, 1239, it's bahar. It's a primitive root, which means the deepest meaning comes from there. Properly, to plow. Does this connect with that ox? What does plowing have to do with the morning light? Well, look here, to break forth. What is it that breaks forth? And how about to plow? Eric Bissell, who teaches Paleo-Hebrew, explains the connections from the Hebrew letters to an ox pulling a line, an ox plowing a line in the soil. When the ox is shown the target on the other side of the field, it will walk toward plowing the soil in a straight line. That line of partition is separating, note that word, that line of partition is separating one side from another. There is still an underlying connection, but the soil surface has been segregated by a visible demarcation, one separated from the other. One side of the furrow belongs to one identity, the plowed. The opposite side of the furrow to the identity of needing to be plowed. Two separate objects are created by a separating action and a specific boundary. Eric also explains boker by referring to a belt buckle. Why a belt buckle? The boker being the bucket, the boker being the buckle itself. The belt goes full circle, as in the 24 hours of a cycle, and the boker provides the separation point from one cycle to another. Yet, the buckle, which is boker, also supplies the connection of one cycle to the next cycle of the week. Yes, there's 7 cycles in a week, but they are definitely connected together inside of a week, but they are definitely separated apart as individual cycles of the week. The boker buckle effectively divides asunder the 7 cycles of the week. So this is a very good way to view boker right here. It's a separation point. That's dawn. And what about the etymological dictionary of the Hebrew language? What definitions do we see here? To cleave, to split, differentiate, that's a strong one, to break forth. And note what is said here, said of the dawn and of light. And cleave and split, and he's got to split and to plow, and it can designate the plowing animal too. Boker, this is a very, very important word with various meanings, and it all brings us towards the dawn. What about this Hebrew lexicon by John Parkhurst? And I want you to recognize this date, 1762. This lexicon does not use the Masoretic vowel points, and I might mention that I appreciate that greatly. The 2 letters, kuf resh, are the 2-letter root word used in older Hebrew lexicons. What does it say here for kuf resh? a hole through which white light appears, as in the first rays of dawn. When you look at the horizon where the sun is supposed to come up, and you see these very first eyelashes of dawn, this light that pokes itself above the darkness, this is exactly what he's talking about. What is his definitions down here? Boker, the morning. That's not evening. The morning, or morning light, which springeth forth upon the earth. So in Luke 178, it is said of the spiritual day spring, or dawn of the gospel day. And I want you to look at these definitions on here. I'm not going to go through them because these are said in many of the other definitions. I'm going to point out one that I really, really like. Time of prayer. What do you do for your body at breakfast? Do you feed it food to nourish your body physically? And do you also in the morning take a time of prayer to nourish your spiritual desire and need in the morning? What about this? Boker, that is when we should be having our prayer with Yahuwah and speaking to him. Note over here, it's still plowing. It goes back to the plow that splits and divides. And in this source, there are many textual references for these definitions. Once again, we see the dividing concept that distinguishes one identity from another. Each weekly cycle is terminated by the arrival of dawn's rays of light, and then the new weekly cycle is ushered in, enveloped with light. The deep inferences of light is a very extensive topic. When Yahuwah preserved the Hebrew nation in Mitzrayim, what presence did he use? Exodus 10:23. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days, while all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. Genesis 1:4. Yahuwah divided the light from the darkness. Isn't that how that the residents of Mitzrayim were in abject darkness? They could barely see the hand in front of their nose. And yet Yisrael had light. Yes, Yahuwah knows how to divide the light from the darkness. What does Yahusha say? John 12:36. While you have light, believe in the light so that you become sons of light. These words Yahusha spoke and went off and was hidden from them. Ephesians 5:8. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Master. Walk as children of light. And there's some more verses to search when you go back through this study. 1 Thessalonians 5:5. For you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Now that we understand Boker better, let's move on, bringing 1 Samuel 5:4a together. But first, let us be mindful to be children of the light. And second, let us also remember to reject the doctrine of darkness, which is sunset theory. They start their day in the night, if that can be reconciled. A reminder, Yahuwah defines his start of the cycles. Through repetition, creating affirmation, Yahuwah is clear in his witness, 1 Samuel 5:4. And when they arose early on the morning, that would be dawn, they arose at the very beginning of the new cycle of the week, and that would be at dawn's first light, which is well before sunrise. And what incredible sight greeted the Philistines' eyes when they viewed the house of their mighty one. Their mighty one, Dagon the fish god, was disassembled, defeated, destroyed, and humiliated by our Creator himself. Here is a word picture with rules of association. Do you notice this hat, the fish hat? Do you notice this fish hat over here in an upright position? Let's read the verse. I have sworn by myself, a word has gone out of my mouth in righteousness and shall not return, so that to me every knee shall bow, every tongue swear. What about this picture? What about the position? Will it be in the same position as Dagon at the end time? Is Dagon a prophecy of this position at the end time, paying allegiance to Yahuwah? It's prophesied. Word picture exposes annihilation of supposed power. So what was severed? The rosh, or head, and two hands at the wrists. The head, it's the principal base of control and authority to implement power. This is very basic, but that is what it is. The hands, that's the physical power and force to articulate, implement, and or repay. So what was the result of Dagon being thrown to the floor and being some of his particles dismembered? The result? The once mighty no God became even less powerful than in his non-existence, because Dagon is a figment of man's imagination. It is something that man built up, but is not reality. So this no God became even less powerful than in his non-existence. Isn't that what Yahuwah did to the gods of Mitzrayim? Exact same pattern. Isaiah has told us 7 times, if we want to know the end, we need to know the beginning. These no gods will be destroyed. So what are we thinking of the Dagon representation that we see today? Today's immediate applications. This rejection of pagan systemic worship is identical to the destiny of Jericho, the city of moon worship. These pagan foundations of worship from antiquity, the foundation of lunar observance alongside Dagon and Ashtoreth, have been determined and rejected by Yahuwah for eternity. Let's place this record of Dagon onto charts now and see if sunset to sunset can reckon with the documentation written in the scriptures. Now, I want to give a little bit of a warning here, a little yellow flag. You're going to see a whole bunch of confusion here in the next little while. And this confusion is trying to make sense out of a sunset theory, so bear with me. And at the end of this, we're going to have a short break and we're going to part 2, where we're going to see Yahuwah's word. So let's continue here. This is the first battle with the Philistines. And the Philistines put themselves in battle array against Israel. And when the battle spread, Israel was smitten by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men in the army, or of the army in the field. At the erroneous idea of bringing the Ark of the Covenant to the location of battle for victory and revenge, Hophni and Phinehas, without authorization, entered the most Kodesh place and carried the Ark into the camp. A deceptive spirit had entered into Hophni and Phinehas of their own accord. And here's the second battle of the Philistines. And mark this on the upper left-hand corner. This is sunset theory. Over here, the beginning of their day is at sunset. This is the first sunset. So mark this here, sunset to sunset. 1 Samuel 4:10, and the Philistines fought, and the Israel was smitten, and every man fled to his tent, and the slaughter was very great. And there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. 30,000. And the messenger answered and said, Yisrael has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. And your 2 sons have died, Hophni and Phinehas, and the ark of Elohim has been captured. The ark was taken. Hophni and Phinehas were slain. According to sunset theory, this 24-hour period ended at sunset, right here. That's when the battle had ended, according to sunset theory. Number 3, again, we're talking about the second battle with the Philistines. And the Philistines took the ark of Elohim and brought it from Eben Haezer to Ashdod. And the Philistines took the ark of Elohim and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon, right here. They set the ark beside Dagon. There's the ark, and he was put in the temple of this fish god. What happens? First, we're going to look at some very important clarification for the next slide. From the Hebrew, to rise early by the word shakam, by definition, is to rise at the start of a predetermined period. With sunset theory, the new cycle of the week always begins after the sun has set. Note these arrows. This is when their new day, or the morrow, begins right here, right after sunset. This is their morrow. Mark that. Remember this. Is it going to find alignment with the words in the scriptures? This is the question. Let's be aware of the acute disconnects coming up between the written words of Yahuwah and the timing effects of sunset theory. Number 4, the divine assault, number 1, on Philistines' pagan god. At this point right here, the Ark of the Covenant had already been positioned beside Dagon. This is what they did prior to sunset. How do we know that? According to sunset theory? Well, it says here, and when the Ashdodites rose early on the morrow is right here, according to sunset theory. The morrow starts after sunset, and this is the morrow of the battle, right here. When the Ashdodites rose early on the morrow and entered the house of Dagon, behold, Dagon had fallen on his face to the earth before the coffer of Yahuwah. So they raised Dagon and restored him to his place. Well, it appears like they want us to believe that Dagon was restored to his place in this night season. They restored him to his original position, supposedly in this night season. What does that do to Dagon and this light season here? Did Dagon have a rest on this light season? Do we read that in the Boker at dawn that Dagon was resting and relaxing? Is this what we read? The divine assault number 2 on the Philistines' pagan god. Remember, this is after sunset. This is when the first morrow begins. This is after sunset, and the second morrow begins right here. Very important. Sunset theory defaults to the cycle starting after the sunset. This effect causes a light season right here, specifically a Boker or dawn, where Dagon has not been disciplined by Yahuwah. Is this what we read in the scriptures? Is this where Dagon rested peacefully? Number 5, sunset theory. Supposedly, the first morrow began after sunset, and Dagon had already been restored to position on this second 24-hour period. The question is, did Yahuwah allow Dagon one Boker or morning light season of reprieve before disjointing it before the ark? Is this where Dagon rests peacefully? Or did he even get a reprieve? For over here, after this sunset, is where the second morrow begins. Does Scripture indicate the second light season was a reprieve for Dagon? What about this word, reprieve? If we look this up in the dictionary, definition is to delay the punishment of someone, such as a condemned prisoner, to give relief or deliverance to for a time. Does Scripture indicate the second light season was a reprieve for Dagon? Is that what we read? Did Dagon receive a reprieve from humiliation? Or did Yahuwah mete out justice, humiliation, and defeat by locating Dagon face down to be discovered immediately at evening? No, it doesn't say evening, not in the Hebrew. He was discovered at dawn of the following light season. So when did Dagon have his reprieve? Or did he? Is sunset theory able to reckon alignment with the words of the scriptures, or is it giving us some problems? Does the Hebrew word erev, the start of the sunset theory cycle, does it appear anywhere near the discovery of Dagon face down in the first or second exposure? Does erev, that's the word for evening, does it actually surface in 1 Samuel 5? I encourage you, go to 1 Samuel 5, look in that chapter and search it out if you can even find the word evening there. I'm quite positive you'll find boker or dawn, but you will not find the word evening in 1 Samuel 5. So what is slowly happening with sunset theory? Is it disintegrating before our eyes? In the very next verse, please note the repeated words. Yes, repeated they give us affirmation. And most important, the addition of a highly exacting Hebrew word. Number 6, the divine assault, number 2, on the pagan or on the Philistines' pagan god. Remember, sunset, the first morrow begins here. Here is the second morrow, begins after the sunset over here. And we're questioning, is Dagon resting peacefully here? This is what the question is. What does the Hebrew word say? And when they arose early on the morrow, well, so far it's okay because sunset's morrow begins here, right after sunset. So let's read this again. And when they arose early on the morrow, what about this word? Morning. Morning is dawn. Boker is dawn. How can they arise early on their sunset morrow right here when Yahuwah declares in scripture that they arose at dawn? What just happened to your sunset theory according to the Hebrew words of our scripture? Is there a problem here? When did they rise? Early on the sunset morrow or at Boker dawn? There's a decision to make here. Did they arise early after sunset, yet 12 hours later at dawn? How can that be? At which early point did they rise? Again, was it Boker dawn on the morning that Dagon was resting? Does scripture reveal a light season between the rising of the Philistines where Dagon had a light season of rest? And when they arose early on the morrow, that would be right here according to sunset theory, early on the morrow, early is at the beginning of a set span of time. Early according to sunset theory, would be immediately after the sunset when their acclaimed 24-hour period starts. Is this where the Philistines arose early to find their shattered pagan no-god, Dagon? Or let's have a look at another option on the next slide. At which early point did they arise? Was it this early point when they arose? What do the Hebrew words say? And when they arose early, shacham, on the morrow, machar, morning, boker. Boker is dawn. That's what the Hebrew words tell us. They arose at dawn, not at sunset. The Philistines did not rise early on the morrow, immediately after the sunset, and also 12 hours later, early, with the eyelids of dawn, on the same 24-hour period. It cannot happen. No, it did not happen. Sunset theory has a serious disconnect here. Huge. There is a choice to be made here, and each one of us needs to make this choice. Do we go with sunset theory, or do we go with the preserved Hebrew words and definitions that Yahuwah preserved for us? What is our choice? Babylonia, the choice is either you go with the double standard confusion of sunset theory, which has just been displayed, or you search for the divine benchmark written by Yahuwah. It really is that simple. Are we splitting hairs here? Absolutely beyond any shadow of a doubt. The adversary depends on you stopping before this point. Let's now restart with Yahuwah's benchmark as written, beginning with creation's first cycle, boker to boker, dawn to dawn. This is the end of part 1. And we're going to do part 2. I'm going to give you a couple minutes because we're going to shake this confusion from our head and do a reset. And we're going to come back to this study in a couple minutes.